How are you today? I'm Melissa, and this is Hang In There. I'm really glad you're here. You can listen at your own pace. This is a space for survivors and for anyone who wants to understand healing and trauma. If it feels okay, take one slow breath with me. Let's begin. Imagine living in a house where the rules keep changing. Some days, it's safe to speak. On other days, the exact words cause conflict or consequences. You're never told the rules, but you're expected to know them. You learn how to adjust your tone. You learn which topics to avoid. You learn when it's safer to stay quiet. There's no single moment you can point to and say that's when it started. No obvious line that says this is abuse. And because there isn't one big event, no physical violence, you don't immediately realize anything is wrong. You feel careful, confused, smaller. If anyone asked you what was happening, you wouldn't know how to answer. Not because nothing was happening, but because what was happening was gradual and hard to explain. This is what living under coercive control can feel like for adult partners. And it's one reason so many survivors struggle to find words for what they lived through. Now imagine being a child in that same house. You don't know the rules, but you know when something feels off. You learn to listen for footsteps. You know when it's better to stay quiet. You learn how to make yourself small so nothing gets worse. No one explains what's happening to you. No one gives you words for it. So your body learns instead. Your stomach hurts. You feel jumpy and on edge. You try very hard to be good. If someone asked you what was wrong, you wouldn't know what to say. Not because nothing was happening, but because you're a child, and this is the only world you know. This is what coercive control can feel like for children. Today's conversation is about language, what happens when it's taken, and what it means when it finally returns. Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. Christine Cocchiola, a leading expert in the field of coercive control. Dr. Cocchiola is one of the most trusted voices helping people understand coercive control, the kind of abuse that's hard to see and hard to explain, and is often dismissed when there are no visible injuries. She brings a powerful combination of lived experience as a survivor and a protective parent, along with decades of professional work as a social worker, educator, and clinician. She has taught, researched, and trained others to recognize coercive control and how deeply it impacts adults and especially children. She is also an author, speaker, and creator of programs like the Protective Parenting Program. Her TED Talk, It's All Coercive Control, has been viewed over 1 million times. What makes her work so meaningful is that it's not just about awareness, it's about change. I'm so grateful to have you here today to help bring clarity to experiences that so many people know are real, but have struggled to put into words. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Cocchiola.
That is the most humbling introduction I think I've ever heard. So thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm really grateful you're here today. This podcast has really always been about survivor stories and about helping people understand what they've lived through. And your work has been such an important part of that. So I'm super excited for our conversation today.
Thank you.
Our goal today is simple, to help people understand what they're experiencing and trust themselves sooner. So I'd love to start there. Before we define coercive control, I really wanted to start with the experience of it, what it actually feels like for people. Because one of the things I hear often, and one of the things I can attest to personally, is that it's very hard to understand or explain while you're living inside it. And then later, there's this clarity. I would love for you to help us understand why this happens.
Sure, sure. So you probably know I have a podcast called Perfect Prey.
Yes.
And the reason why I call it Perfect Prey is because abusers choose their victims. And that is never a victim's fault. This isn't about codependency. Predators know exactly the type of person who's going to work hard at a relationship. When we interview victims, when we hear their stories, they're not the type of person who gives up easily. They're the type, right? They're the type of person who tends to be more agreeable, and that can be problematic when you're in a relationship that's actually unhealthy. But imagine if all the people you and I knew who are victims actually partnered with someone who had similar character traits as them. These would be really healthy, wonderful relationships. And so I think to your point, why does this happen or how does this happen? Abusers know what they're looking for. They're not looking for a person who shirks responsibility, who doesn't give effort. They're looking for the complete opposite. And they also very often mirror the qualities that they see in victims because, at their core, if we were to drill it down, they know they're not good human beings. They know that. And they're attracted to people who can actually make them look better. And so,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. So you said, how come victims can't see it when they're in it? The reality is, as you know from my TEDx, coercive control is the underpinning of it all. It can be physically violent or sexually violent. It can certainly be like very overt financial abuse where, you're never allowed to go out and spend any money on yourself, or you have to give all your money to the abuser. That's very overt. That's like wow, if you told someone else that, they'd be like, that's kind of crazy, right? But the other aspect of coercion and control that we've really not done a good job about educating people on is this covert nature of abuse. It's more insidious, it's more nuanced. But here's the deal, we've known this forever. This is not like a new problem. It's a problem since the beginning of time where people in positions of power, whether it's gendered power, man over woman, or even men and men, partner over partner, or woman over woman, like whoever has more power is going to be the person who's able to, in many ways, create the trajectory of the relationship. Unless you realize it, unless you know what's going on. And we don't teach young people about red and green flags in a relationship dynamic. Feminist psychologists called it in the 1970s psychological warfare. Eiderman talked about this in 1957 when he talked about what happens to people who are prisoners of war, how they could be worn down over time. And so
Right.
I will just end with this idea that, and I was on a call today with a group of protective mothers that I support in support groups. And I will end with this is that if it could happen to me, I was an advocate since the age of 19, a social justice advocate, worked in child welfare, worked in family court. I am a therapist. I educate every single semester on the power and control wheel. There was one physically violent incident. I was slapped in the face when I was very young, and then never another one. I didn't know what was happening to me. And so if it can happen to someone out there educating, and as you know, Senator Rubio in California was just talking very openly about her own abuse very educated woman, prolific in legislation. Now, she made the legislation after she realized she was an abuse victim, but we're not talking about people who are not smart or
Right.
not, So abusers
Right.
know. Abusers know.
You've got to give yourself a little grace because, like you said, it is so nuanced and just sneaky and it's progressive. And I'd like to talk about this for children too, because I know you're focusing on children very much. I would love to know how this shows up differently for them too, because they are involved in many of these homes.
Definitely unacknowledged child abuse.
Exactly.
Yes, and that the children are not witnesses of or exposed to. And that's historically what the research would say is that a child is a witness of or exposed to. As you know, I wrote the children's book Every Moment of Every Day because children feel it in their body, just like we do. Like how, I mean, honestly, you said what are the differences, but I would almost, there are differences, but I think there are more similarities between what the
Right.
adult victim experiences and the children experience than differences.
When I talk to my children about this too, I said something that it's really insightful because they're adults now. And we were talking about how I almost felt like I grew up with them. I was
Mm.
almost like a child in that home. Just for the similarities piece here, I totally understand how that could happen. It's a tough situation for everybody. So, from here, I'd love to put some language to it, right? Because we just described the experiences of it. But I think once you have language, things really start to come into focus, especially because this doesn't always look the way people expect it to, right? So, I really want to focus on how can we recognize this? How can we give our listeners and people who are looking for information some identifiers, some ways to recognize this, to get ahead of it, to figure it out faster than I did.
Yeah, yeah. So when I think about primary things, I think about ask yourself if you're listening to this, is your relationship based on equality? Is each person giving to the relationship, contributing to the relationship on the same plane? And equality does not mean you have to share everything that's yours. Equality means that if we're contributing to a house, that we're each contributing our fair share to the house. But that doesn't mean you can't have your own savings account, right? Or that you can't go do things with your girlfriends, right? So equality. Does this person use vulnerabilities against you? Have there been arguments? And these are like, again, the more insidious things. We're not talking about someone verbally assaulting you. That's a red flag, right? That's a very blatant red flag. I always say a pattern is one more than one. And what we know about coercive control is that there is a pattern of behavior. But because there's also good experiences, our brain wants to disassociate from those negative experiences. It tries to compartmentalize them. And what we have to do is keep bringing them up over and over and over again. Bring up those negative experiences because your brain will then begin to be more readily able to see them. A second thing is this vulnerability. You've shared something with your partner. You've shared maybe that your family maybe lost their home when you were younger because they couldn't financially afford it. That's a significant vulnerability. An abuser will bring that up in arguments. And that's a
Absolutely.
right. They find your pain point. They find a wound, something that is you feel like you've shared with someone you trust that you love, and they will bring that up. They will say, oh, your mother was diagnosed with depression. That's why you're this way, right? And so, or you are on it. What if you are on an antidepressant or you're on, and the reason why, by the way, if you're suffering,
Right.
by the way, this is a huge one. If you have a lot of anxiety in your home and you don't know why, that's a red flag. And so when you go to
Absolutely.
when you go to a therapist should be asking, tell me about the relationship dynamics in your home. Are they equitable? Are you able to share vulnerabilities and feel safe? Or are you walking on eggshells? Right? Is your anxiety as a result of not being able to just be present in your life? And so there's other questions. Is there counter parenting going on? What is counter parenting? Are you able to go out with friends? And so I talk about it in degrees. Abusers start off in relationship dynamics by obtaining control. And that is often feels pretty damn good, by the way. It's love bombing.
Absolutely.
It's
It's
love
very convincing. It appears as if they're caring and they're loving and they're considerate.
100%. And love bombing is now part of coercive control legislation in the UK. It's criminalized in the UK, not codified as it is in 9 states or 10 states now in the United States. It's criminalized. And love bombing is seen as a tactic. So if the relationship moves too fast, if somebody tells you they're your soulmate, if somebody tells you that their ex is crazy and that they're divorcing them because of this or that, right? So are you shape shifting when you're with the abuser? Do you have to look a certain way? Do you have to wear certain clothes? And it'll make them happy and you'll have a wonderful date. But are you not able to be your authentic self? Are you starting to slowly? What happens is with coercive control is an abuser takes away your autonomy, your sense of self, your identity. And so this feels good in the beginning because you're like, oh my God, this person loves me so much. But then over time, once I've obtained control by luring you in, it's a grooming process. The next phase is I'm going to maintain it. And how do I maintain it? I know I'm going to gaslight you. I'm going to manipulate you. I'm going to isolate you. You don't really want to go out with your girlfriends this weekend. I miss you. I'm worried about you. I only texted you 5 times because it's terrible rain out there and I'm worried about you driving in the rain. All of these things can be very much shrouded in love and care. And actually what they are is control. So someone coerces you to dress a certain way. Someone coerces you to give a certain amount of your money into a family account or something like that. Someone controls you by making sure you come home early enough or that you're not going out with your girlfriends. Are you sure you want to go on a run today? There's a little bit of slickness on the ground. I'm going to maintain control in this way. When I continue with that intermittent, like it feels good, but there's some doubt in my mind, but it feels so good. And then the next phase is if I see you, if I'm starting to pull away, like something doesn't feel right, now I'm going to regain control. And I will regain that control by diminishing you more overtly in front of the children. I was doing it all along, but now I'm going to diminish you more overtly. I'm going to say, Mom's always tired, or why are you tired again? Or why are you working late again in front of the children? Or Mom ruined dinner again. And then from there, I'm also going to start denying and attacking you and reversing victim and offender. I'm going to make it that you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. You cheated. You did all of these things. You need to be on your meds. And then I'm going to use, of course, the finances and maybe stop paying bills. And again, another way to control you. And of course, vexatious litigation. And as we know, the most heartbreaking is when they truly overtly weaponize the children. They've been weaponizing the children all along. It didn't just happen.
Oh, and it's so sad because I remember when my children were younger and there would be comments made from my children. Why do you have to ask him permission? Why can't you just bring us somewhere, wherever it was? They picked that up
They
very
did.
young. And at that point, I used to say, I don't have to ask permission, but they knew. They knew exactly what was going on as much as they could understand because it was completely in their face.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
And I
it's
love that they saw that because a lot of children don't see that. So your children, I would say, well, certainly, of course, there's some amazing gifts that you gave them as their mother, but also they were born in a more resilient way where they could actually already have the ability to discern. And a lot of children, just by nature of how we're born too, that doesn't come as easy. You know,
interesting.
yeah. So some protective parents will say, well, how come I have 3 children? How come he's aligned and these 2 see it clearly? Right. And so it really is about a vulnerability in a child that is not their fault. It's how we're all born. Right. Some people just don't have that sensibility, that discernment. They don't listen to their bodies as much. And then an abuser by the way, will hyper focus on that child typically and lure them in more.
Yeah, sometimes it would, for other people too, sometimes it would switch between children too. And one
100%.
wouldn't respond the right way, and then they would switch to the other child. And if they responded better, then when they got tired of it, they would go back and try a different approach with another one of the children. It's so tricky and it's embarrassing as a parent to be put in those positions. And it kind of shoots you down. Well, I don't want this to come up again because that's embarrassing. I don't want my kids to see me that way.
Mhm.
And
You're
so
talking about shame.
exactly. And you don't know. I didn't realize that at the time. I just was thinking, oh my goodness, this is obvious. What
That's
am I
right.
going to do? How am I going to explain this? And I did find many times where I would have conversations with them on the side and try to explain this isn't okay. This isn't okay. But when somebody's living inside it and they don't have a way out, it looks okay.
Hmm.
This is very confusing for them.
Very confusing. And I
I
love that
want,
you were able to have those conversations with them on the side. If you're engaged in family court, that can be extremely tricky, right? Because it can be used against you. And then, as you said, an abuser is going to hyper focus on a vulnerability in a child, but they often will switch children. I have moms who their children, the 18-year-old was the favorite child. They're always objectified. If your listeners hear nothing else from me, these abusers do not know how to love. Children deserve unconditional love, and
yes,
abusers only give conditional love. And there's an inability to be authentically myself in that family system, and that ruptures attachment. And so that child feels untethered in that family system. That is not love. No matter how the abuser behaved, no, it was all performative. When they were younger, maybe they loved the kids, they acted like they were a great parent. As you began to separate, that's when their true colors came out. But oftentimes they will objectify one child over another because that child is more vulnerable, more easily lured in. And they could be lured in by things, as we know, access to social media, being able to stay on their video games later, being given gifts, etc. But I have moms and dads too, I have male clients, by the way, but when the child goes off to college, the abuser just moves to the next kid because they need something to fulfill them. Unless they've actually moved on to another family system and they're maybe not as disordered as some abusers can be. But most abusers are going to stick around to try to hyper focus on the next child or the more vulnerable child. Unfortunately, I see this a lot with neurodivergency, where a child has a neurodivergency and the abuser capitalizes on that as a way. Again, that child has processing issues sometimes, right?
right.
I'm hitting something on the head for you right there. I could see your face.
Oh, that's just so sad. And
Yeah,
every child is different. And you're absolutely right. There are processing differences. Man, yeah, that's just, it's so sad. It's just so manipulative.
it is. There's an intent. This is virtually every domestic abuser. There are some people who have maladaptive coping. They might hit somebody one time. There's no excuse for it. You need to leave that person. You need to not be in a relationship with them. But maybe they go to years of therapy, figure out why they get so angry so fast. But their intent wasn't to prey upon you. Their intent was to perhaps have a decent relationship, but they couldn't control their anger. Still not a relationship to be in. It's not our job to fix people, right? However, when we talk about domestic abuse, we're talking about virtually every single one of these people having character traits that creates a desire to control others and to coerce others. And it's willful. It's an act. It's intentional and it's malevolent. It
And they
is
choose to do it. They choose to do it.
100%.
You've described coercive control as a pattern, almost like an umbrella. And I love how you explain this, where under coercive control, there are many forms of maltreatment, psychological harm,
Uh-huh.
like you said, isolation, manipulation, not one thing. And they're all connected. They're all under
Uh-huh.
this umbrella. And I don't think people realize just how much can exist there.
Uh-huh. It kind of drives me a little bonkers when people like say something like coercive control and post separation abuse, or coercive control and psychological abuse, or coercive control and legal abuse. It's all coercive control. It's all intentional, malevolent, willful acting to harm another person. So, in that, abusers don't just start off in a relationship physically violent. They don't just start off in a relationship saying, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to take your
Right.
children. They start off with the psychological tactics that we talked about earlier, where it feels good. And then eventually they move on to other tactics to further control and diminish our agency. It's a pattern of behavior, multifaceted approach to diminish agency, all the while that this is going on. So let's just say the psychological stuff is going on, good, bad, and ugly. All the while, there's a diminishing of you as a parent in the home. Never so overtly, doesn't have to be huge. It can be little tiny things. That's going on. So the weaponization of children is already going on. And then if in fact you begin to create boundaries around this person, you say, wait a minute, I am going out with my girlfriends. I'm going out tonight. Please don't call me. I'm going out and I'll be home at 11 o'clock. Or I am going out for that run on Saturday. There's a special run going on. I'm going out on that run on Saturday. The abuser is now going to exert more power because you are moving outside of their cage. So I always say it's like a cage. And in the abuser's world, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. We get diminished. And once we start to push back, the abuser pushes back harder. And that's when we're going to see more overt abuse. That's when they're not going to deposit their fair share in the family account. They're going to say, you figure out the mortgage. That's when they're going to say to the kids, your mother, she cheated on me. That's when they're going to say something like, if you leave, the kids are going to live with me. The threats, right? And then that's when, if they can't control you in those ways, this is when those people who are not quite as savvy, have really poor coping mechanisms, that's when they're going to become physically violent. When I used to work in child welfare, and of course I'm working in very impoverished neighborhoods, lower socioeconomic class, lack of education, right? There's a lot of that going on. It's easy to understand that a lot of these abusers were physically violent earlier on
Okay.
because they didn't have the coping mechanisms that the world teaches us. In order to be a successful lawyer, you cannot scream and yell at a judge. In order to be the plumber that everybody in town loves, you have to behave a certain way. You take people who haven't had those types of experiences and had trauma, which we know all abusers have had trauma. Those are the people who are going to have less ability to control themselves.
Right.
But you take the savviest of people, the people have figured out how to maneuver the world, whether it's family, community, coaching, they work in a school system, they're a lawyer, whatever it is, they have figured out how to navigate the world. They're very performative. And this is why they show up in court and win a lot of times, because nobody could expect that they would be abusive.
Exactly. They're very good at putting on that show. And it's about showing people one thing and you go into that house and the door closes and it's completely different.
Yes. Yes.
I used to think shortly after I got out, I just was in therapy and I was looking back at it and I'm like, how does a person become that good at manipulating? And I couldn't get my head wrapped around it. And I mean, I understand the science and everything behind it now, but when you're living in it, you're thinking to yourself that he or she couldn't possibly want to hurt me. He or
Mm,
she couldn't possibly have meant it that way.
mm,
Maybe I'm misunderstanding and so on. When we're paired up with these people and we are empaths and we have those characteristics that they're looking for, it just wouldn't occur to many of us, if not most to all of us, that somebody would do that on purpose.
uh-huh,
And so I just think it's so important to tell people that no, this is not your fault. This is not a character flaw in you. This isn't something you missed. This is meant to be sneaky. This
mhm.
is meant to confuse you.
It is intended. It's psychological warfare, as feminist psychologists said in the early 70s. Victims used to say the worst part was not the physical violence, it was the fear of what would come next. And this is what we know is it's a mind bending of your reality to the point where you, like you just said, you're like, maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe, maybe it's not that bad. We do that too all the time. We minimize behaviors because we can't imagine that someone would actually have malevolent intent. And this is the only time for me as a therapist where, when I meet with clients, because I would go to therapy and I would be gaslit by therapists. And it's the only time where black and white thinking is very helpful. This is abuse. Period. There's no nuances here. There's no, well, I see your point. Maybe he didn't mean it that way. Or I see your point. Maybe if you didn't go out last Thursday and Friday, then this Friday, you're right. Maybe he wouldn't be so angry. No, we can talk about that separate, but no, this is abuse.
I want to go back to just like the pattern of it all, how it builds and it shifts, and it makes it really hard for somebody to notice what's happening. Over time, people start to feel like they can't explain themselves anymore. I remember thinking, I can't even articulate this. It led to me doubting myself even more. Just all of these things happening internally in me. And I'm wondering if you can help clarify why it is so difficult to explain.
There's a problem in society that a lot of people don't understand the patterns of abuse. And a lot of people minimize it. And we see this. I mean, Judith Herman writes about this in her book, Truth and Repair. It's like the world doesn't recognize abuse in the way that it should. So we have systems that minimize. And so then how do we really create the language around it if other people don't even acknowledge it, right? But I would say that it's really about knowing that we all deserve to be treated with, I mean, the word respect doesn't even really cover it, but equality, that we all get to have freedom of choice. And that's how Dr. Evan Stark, he really framed it around this idea that we all deserve liberty. And coercive control takes away our liberty to be ourselves, just to be in our home, to not walk on eggshells, to not worry about being in trouble because you went to get your hair done or something like that.
The dishes aren't done.
The dishes
The
aren't
laundry's
done.
not folded.
That's right. And what I want your listeners to understand is that some abusers will be very authoritarian in they're all authoritarian, but they'll be overtly authoritarian in their behavior. Why aren't the dishes done? I can't believe you didn't finish the wash. And that is almost, in some ways, like easier to see because it's so blatant. Like, what do you mean? Why aren't the dishes done? I worked today. Like, right? But we're also talking about the other side of that, which is much more nuanced and insidious. And so abuse doesn't have to feel or look bad to the world. For example, my ex, who was always cooking. Now, he cooked, I cleaned. That felt like a partnership, except that when I cooked, he didn't clean. And except that when it was time to clean up after dinner, he would lure the children away to watch TV with him instead of having them do an appropriate thing, an appropriate agency building thing, something that creates competence in children to actually help with the dishes, like to participate in that process. What that felt like fun. That was them going to watch a movie and here I am, or a TV show, and here I am ruining it. So know that it doesn't have to be overtly, you need to do this or you didn't do this. It can be much more nuanced. But is it diminishing you? Ask yourself, do I actually feel like I am equal in this arrangement? That I have personal agency, that I can speak my voice, that I'm treated fairly? I'll go back to the word respectfully, right? Is that happening here? Because if there's a pattern of that not happening, and a pattern is one more than one, then it's not going to get better. It's actually going to get worse.
I remember just trying to articulate and trying to explain it. And I would even be questioned, what happened? And I can't explain it. So my brain just defaulted to documenting just for my own self. At the beginning, I didn't know why I was documenting, but I would go back to that documentation and I would read it. No, no, this happened. No, I remember this. This happened. I'm not remembering it wrong. It was that bad. And I think that's just something that really helps put language around these situations, because the memory in traumatic situations, it makes you question yourself because it will get brought up. They're going to gaslight you into thinking that's not how it happened.
Mm-hmm. And I call that the re-traumatization list. Because so we become trauma bonded, as there's a neurological response. Our brain wants to believe that things are okay. It feels safer to think that we're in an okay and a safe relationship. And the reality is we're not. So when we are sitting in self-doubt, the trauma bond, it's important to go back to the list of all the horrible things that individual has done to you. The time they called you stupid in front of the kids, the time that you got a flat tire and they were angry and had a fit because you had that flat tire, the time you scrambled to fix the flat tire before they got there because you didn't want them to be mad at you about the flat tire. Like there's just so many things, right? So all of that, I call it re-traumatization because you do have to read through the traumatic experiences to actually alert your brain, no, it actually is this bad. No,
Right.
it actually is okay that you just hung up the phone on him, or that you decided to escape, like that you decided to do that.
I just really hope people understand, please don't question yourself. And you don't need to compare it. It looks different for everyone. Narcissists are not all the same. It's going to be different. One person's experience isn't going to look like this, therefore yours isn't abuse.
That's right. 100%. Never compare your situation. Ask yourself, what is my body telling me? How do I feel about this? And Dr. Ramani and I, she's a very dear friend, and we talk about this. Someone can be narcissistic and a pain in the butt and hard to get along with, and just so self-serving and grandiose, maybe, and you can see them sometimes a mile away. That's not a coercive controller. That's not. A coercive controller, again, is behaving willfully, intentionally to cause harm. There's an intent to cause harm. And by the way, that doesn't mean you belong in a relationship with someone who is grandiose and self-serving and all of those things. That doesn't mean that. And so it's just knowing that you deserve a relationship that fulfills you and gives to you. We call it mutuality in the therapeutic world. Both of you, there's reciprocity. You're both giving, you're both receiving. And in these relationships, that's not the case. You become smaller and smaller and smaller. And your children are watching this. They're feeling it in their bodies. And there's never a right time to leave because it's different for everybody and there's never any judgment. But knowing that your kids deserve the gift of perspective, they could deserve to see. I mean, I always say when protective parents finally leave the abuse, it's the first time in their children's life the children actually get to know who their mother or their father is. Who are they? I don't even know who they are, and I get to figure that out. Yeah.
It's a beautiful time. I agree. And just as a person who got out, getting to reestablish and figure out I'm still in there. I'm still back there. And
Mm-hmm.
dig that back up again and be that person that I had to hide, or I couldn't, I wanted to wear Doc Martens and I couldn't wear Doc Martens, or I wanted to wear certain clothes and I couldn't. And now I'm getting the freedom to do that. And yes, my children are eating it up. They're having so much fun watching this. And they say things like, I'm really glad you got to do this. I'm so happy you're getting to wear what the Doc Martens. And it's such a wonderful place, and it's really hard, but I really want people to understand listening that when it's your time to leave, you can do it
Mm-hmm.
and you can almost reestablish who you want to be. And what a
Mm-hmm.
freeing feeling that is.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. It's a beautiful thing. You get to know yourself again. And you started off the conversation so well, eloquently, by saying your identity is lost and you lose your identity. And that's exactly what happens. You get your identity back, and you also are a different person, changed. And there's so much grief in all of that. Like the fact that you had to experience that, your children had to experience it, and it continues post separation. Post separation is coercive control intensified. It
It
happens
is.
within the relationship and outside of the relationship. So there's grief. There's a lot of grief, but there's a lot of growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could be its own podcast. Post separation is a very real and very scary thing. And it's great that you're helping people with that, because I didn't know that help existed when I was going through it. So I just think it's so important for people to understand, even if they get this last 5 minutes where they hear there's help for you. There are people out there who offer these services. Contact them if you can. There is help for you. We're not
Mhm.
alone. There are millions of us on this planet who have dealt with or are dealing with living in these situations with these types of people. And we can come together, and we have so many options for helping each other. That's what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is just try to communicate. I'm going through it. There's so many people who are going through the same thing. I really wanted to just talk about how important it was for me when I realized what coercive control was, and putting language to that was so enlightening. And it happened late. I'd been out for years. So I really just wanted to talk about how important it is to give language back. And then the self-trust can come back. And for the first time, maybe what you felt actually makes sense. And it's such an important shift for people. So I really appreciate you being on today and helping clarify some of these things, and just having a conversation about what to look for. And these feelings are normal. I do want to, before we close, just come back to something we talked about earlier. For so many people, the hardest part isn't just what they lived through. It's not having the words for it while it was happening. And sometimes it isn't until much later, with distance and language, that things begin to make sense. If that's you listening, if anything in this conversation helped something click, I want you to know you're not alone. What you experienced is real. Even if it was hard to explain, even if no one recognized it at the time, even if you doubted yourself, understanding doesn't change what happened, but it can change how you hold it and how you move forward. Dr. Cocchiola, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for the work you've done to bring language to experiences that so many people have struggled to name, and for continuing to advocate for survivors and children. We could go on for hours. I would love to revisit some of these topics with you sometime. Thank
Thank
you for your
you.
willingness to have this conversation today.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the work you're doing. I mean, it takes an army of, I always call it a sea of allies.
I love
We
it.
need a sea of people who are good human beings, really trying to elevate this conversation. So I so appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Cocchiola's work, you can find her at www.coercivecontrolconsulting.com. And you can also listen to her podcast, Perfect Prey. We'll link her TED Talk, It's All Coercive Control, in the show notes. If something in this conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need it. This is Hang In There. Listen, heal, rise.